Hello, folks. If you're watching this, I guess you're pretty bored. Um, but I just thought it was Andy Kinnear actually was on Twitter the other day, and he put up his favourite slide out of his slide deck. And I thought, oh, I could do that. And then I thought, well, actually, maybe I ought to do a bit more. I'm a fat 58-year-old with asthma shielded, and I'm speaking to you from my kitchen. So I thought I'd just pull up a few random old slides just in case I don't make it. And the 15 years of experience I had in this field doesn't end up in the book I was one day hoping to write. So just in case, here's some stuff I learned about health informatics. First law of clinical leadership. You have to be able to look your fellow clinicians in the eye and answer the question that is in their hearts, which is, who the flipping heck are you? Well, I'm an NHS doctor. I have been for 30 years. I've been a consultant psychiatrist for 20 odd. I'm a former trust medical director. I was national clinical lead for IT brackets mental health during the national programme. I'm a founding member and a former chairman of the National CCIO Network and founding director of the Great North Care Record. And I'm currently medical director of Sleep Station, which is an online CBT service. A pretty good time actually to get into online therapy services, given what's going on out there. So really, there are several bits to what I want to tell you that I've learned about the triumphs and the disasters that I've been involved in NHS IT. So the first bit's going to be a review from inside the National Health Service's failed 12.7 billion national programme for IT. Not a complete failure. There's some bits of it that were effective, not least mental health, where we had some success. I want to try and help learn some of those lessons and how big IT projects fail, usually not because of the technology, but because of the anthropology, sociology, and psychology, the soft stuff that isn't generally in the IT textbooks or project management textbooks. And I want to tell you how we applied those lessons and completed a successful large regional IT project by focusing almost entirely on the soft stuff and allowing the technology to follow. And then I want to talk a little bit about this latest chapter where I have joined this amazing outfit called Sleep Station, who have been paperless, digital, online, and delivering therapy for over 10 years. It's something I dreamed of happening in the future. I'd no idea it was happening in my hometown, under my nose, and now I'm their medical director. Hallelujah. So why did I get involved in IT? Well, this young couple is myself and my beautiful wife standing in front of what is allegedly Hippocrates' tree on the island of Kos, where Hippocrates built the first medical school. And allegedly modern medicine was born there. 6 weeks before that photograph was taken, I got the phone call from hell. I was working as an accident emergency doctor in a town called South Shields in the northeast, and Fiona, my girlfriend, fiance, was working in Darlington in a children's intensive care unit. And I got the phone call that everybody dreads, and it was to say, you'd better come quick. Your girlfriend's been in a road accident. She's in a coma. And she's in Darlington Memorial Hospital. So I jumped in the car and made double quick time to Darlington, which I think was about 35 miles. On the way, I passed her wrecked car, which was under an articulated lorry on a roundabout on the A66. Didn't look like anybody could possibly survive, but they told me she was in a coma. So when I got there, when I got to A&E, she was, I was shown into the room where she was being looked after. And it was back in the day when general hospitals didn't have a CT scanner. And she was weirdly unconscious, making strange noises. And they sent for the neurosurgeons, potentially to drill a hole in her head to relieve pressure from what was thought to be a head injury. She had a very clear head injury. but her consciousness was extremely limited. The moment that I touched her, I knew what it was. She was hypoglycemic. Nobody in the hospital knew, and I'd forgot to tell them in my haste that Fiona was a type 1 diabetic, and that when we put up a dextrose infusion, she came round inside a minute, and we didn't have to drill a hole in her head. Now, it struck me right there and then that it would be quite a good idea if people's information could follow them to the point of care where they needed it. So that was kind of my early motivation. Why get involved in information sharing? Picture the scene. Dawn rises over the River Thames. Things can only get better, booms out of the PA system outside Labour Party headquarters, and a young Prime Minister, Tony Blair, emerges into the sunshine with his beautiful wife, with one arm held aloft like Alan Shearer scoring a goal. And he starts to talk, and he talks about how long Labour have been out of power and how Labour can do great things. And in that moment, I'd been up all night. We had champagne for breakfast. After many, many long years of Tory rule, we were over the moon. Anything seemed possible. So when not long after that, Tony allegedly met Bill Gates and had a conversation on a sofa at 10 Downing Street, and they talked about making the NHS go digital. We all thought that could be possible. That could actually happen. Unlike some of Tony Blair's better ideas, they weren't always right, and sometimes things were more complicated. It seemed like a good idea at the time, exactly like it seemed like a good idea to be friends with Colonel Gaddafi. Although he didn't get everything right, I do have to say in his defence, I think we're all probably killed for a politician of that competence right now. But there you go. Can't win them all. So the National Programme for IT was born. Politically led, top-down idea, and a big idea, to be honest. Now, Milton Friedman, Margaret Thatcher's favourite economist, used to say this about money, and while I'm not a fan of Thatcher or Friedman, this makes sense. He says that there's 4 ways to spend your money. You can spend your own money on yourself. So if you're buying a winter coat, you'll get a good quality winter coat. You will spend an appropriate amount of money. It's your money. You're no fool. So you'll get value. You can spend your own money on somebody else, buying a birthday present, etc. Again, you'll be careful. You'll want to get something nice, but you won't buy anything at any cost. Then there's spending someone else's money on yourself, in which case I'll have the lobster and the Chateau Lafitte, 92 please. You don't really care. And then they're spending someone else's money on someone else. Now, which one of these is the National Programme for IT going to pan out as? It's someone else's money on someone else, and that's very often a bad way to get value and might have been predicted. But how hard could it be? I mean, other industries have gone digital, haven't they? How hard could it be? So NP Fit set off with a great deal of enthusiasm and thinking, well, we can do this. And we had a ton of money in the end. I think they worked out we had about £12.7 billion to spend on the digitisation of the health service. And the thing about that sort of money is that, you see, as a psychiatrist for 30 years, I thought I knew a lot about human behaviour and personality, but I learned more when I joined the National Programme about human behaviour than I think I did in the previous 25 years, to be honest. I learned, for example, that that amount of money will warp space-time. It will cause all kinds of crazy behaviour if you put that money down on the table. Not least, honesty can be a casualty, and this amount of money actually can make can make fat, middle-aged, Geordie psychiatrists sexually irresistible to software sales staff. Who knew? Obviously, there was some awareness that we might run into trouble in terms of getting a big government IT project done on time and on budget. So we made sure that we made a huge written spec, a doorstop document about what we were buying, and we signed a contract in blood with a variety of suppliers at the outset to make sure that we didn't get fleeced. And we decided that rather than pilot anywhere, how big does an IT project have to be too big? So I think the only organisation bigger than the NHS in terms of its number of employees is the Chinese Red Army. And we decided that we'd do them all at the same time. Let's not pilot it anywhere. Let's do the whole thing right now. Now, looking back, it's easy to say that might have been a little bit ambitious. Well, of course, it was too ambitious, but not if you chunk up the country into regions. So we chunked it up into these regions, and we gave bits of the project to different suppliers. So somebody would do all of London, somebody would do the southern cluster, eastern cluster, northeast, etc. So we didn't have all our eggs in one basket. Perfect sense, really, when you think about it. Unfortunately, things didn't go too well in terms of our original leader. We've had lots of leaders in the national programme, and they changed on a regular basis. And Richard Granger, our original leader, who actually joined the programme before I did and left the day I joined, he famously described what he was going to do with the system suppliers by describing them as like huskies on a dog sled on a mission to the South Pole. If one of the huskies failed, you could shoot it, cut it up, and feed it to the other dogs. Well, unfortunately, because we had underestimated the complexity of the problem and what we would be asking the suppliers to deliver, very quickly we only had 2 huskies left. And worse than that, one of the huskies successfully sued us for £700 million because of the way the contract was written. They felt was undeliverable. It was all getting pretty embarrassing. So a little bit about some of the soft stuff, I think, where we went wrong. The project was extremely complex, and if you're going to do a complex project, you're going to need to have the authority to make it happen. Now, one of the issues in the health service was we didn't have a single institution where the authority sat to do all of this stuff. Now, the godfather of sociology, Max Weber, German sociologist of the Victorian age, talked about different kinds of authority, and it's really important, actually, if you're doing a big IT project, that you understand different kinds of authority. So he talked about structural authority. I'm your boss, so I can tell you what to do. Moral authority. I'm your priest, so I can tell you what to do. Financial authority. I'm paying the bill, so I get to tell you what to do. Sapiential authority, from the Latin sapiens, meaning wisdom. You have special knowledge that gives you authority over other people. You have charismatic authority. You're Adolf Hitler, and you can manipulate a crowd to do what you want. But to make a really big project go, you're going to need all of those. All those different kinds of authority are going to need to line up to make something like NPFit work. And the other bit we didn't really get at the time was that the issue of standards. So one of my heroes in this slide is the young man, dark-haired young man on the right, and this photograph was taken at the dawn of the age of electricity. It's taken in Gateshead in Newcastle, where we invented electricity, and importantly, that young man, Edward Mertz, came up with the idea that, you know what, if you've got a vacuum cleaner that only works on 1 voltage in 1 district, nothing will come of electricity. So Charles Edward Mertz actually was the father of the national grid, and he gave us the standard of 240 volts and 50 hertz. Next to him is Lord Kelvin, and next to him is Thomas Westinghouse, who founded the famous power generation company in the US after he'd visited Gateshead and Charles Hesterman Mertz. We didn't get any of those standards in place at the outset of the National Programme for IT, and consequently, whatever we did was going to be broken. There were standards around, SNOMED, ICT-10, etc., but these were really largely unimplemented in terms of ICD-10, in terms of regular use by clinicians, and in terms of SNOMED, this was had only been heard of by a handful of wonks who lived under stones in statistics departments, and none of the general medical profession had ever heard of it. Sorry, wonks, you know I love you. And the other issue, of course, with the National Health Service is that it isn't a National Health Service. The National Health Service runs on the lava lamp principle. You take a big blob of wax. This is how the lava lamp works, and the NHS mirrors it. You apply political heat underneath, and the big blob of wax turns into smaller blobs or district health authorities, and they continuously circulate in a continuous random realignments. Every health minister likes to have a tinker with the structure of the NHS, and the constantly churning organisational structure means that it's very difficult to achieve anything at a national level. Obviously, plenty more where that came from, if both you and I can be bothered. See you soon, I hope.